Good morning.
Good to see you all this morning. Thank you for joining us for this special hour together this morning. We have a beautiful day unfolding. It's going to get sunnier and sunnier today. We're delighted to have Michael Contras here as our musical guest. We get to do some music together. You might have noticed in the newsletter I came up trying out a name for us. How about the Unitics?
Unitics, that's good.
Like it
Sounds a little close to lunatic.
It does. Well, we'll keep working with it. That's a title in progress. As you all know, we've got a fairly relaxed mask policy now at the church, but there are masks, of course, available at the doors. If you want the added protection, just grab one back there. What else to announce? I always like to start with just a few quick announcements, and then our platform host will fill them in more later. But we have our annual meeting today, as most of you know. It's really a short meeting of only a half an hour or so. We'll start after a short break after the service to go back and get some coffee and refreshments. And you're welcome to bring them back in here, those of you here, and we'll convene for it's an annual meeting, once a year opportunity to kind of hear how the church has been doing and how things are going forward. I think we might have one visitor in the house today. Let's make sure he gets a gift bag, whatever. Welcome. Good, glad to have you here today. A couple things coming up in 2 weeks on April 2nd. That you might want to be aware of. One of them is the memorial service for Barbara Wallace, very well known in our Unity community, and that's midday on Saturday, April 2nd at a local restaurant. There's a flyer about it on the back board, and there's a flyer on her Facebook page. Those of you who are friends of Barbara's, you can get the details there, and you can RSVP to let them know you're coming, because they are serving, I think, hors d'oeuvres and things. And also on April 2nd, Bill Cohen is having another of his lovely concerts. This is a new one for him. Time and Memory is the theme. Joe and I have the privilege of working with him on that, doing some vocal backup, and Joe adding some guitar. It's at the Unitarian Church in person on Saturday, April 2nd at 7 o'clock. And admission is free, but they're going to take a donation for the Alzheimer's Association of Central Ohio. And they say take a mask just in case the church is requiring them. I think they're not right now, but take it along just in case. And that's about it. Many thanks to everyone out there in here for your continuing tithes, donations, and support of the church in so many ways. We're so grateful for your support. So we always want to begin with prayer and begin to think about what we are lifting up in our hearts and minds. We are, of course, thinking of all the people in Ukraine and all the need for peace in our world. And we are thinking of a lot of needs for healing among us. So we begin to lift that up in our thoughts as we do a prayerful song together, and then we'll have an opening prayer. This is Joe will kind of come up. We're going to join Michael for this. It's an old one called "Light the Lamp." That I think the lyrics came from Yogananda, and Joe and I put some music to it quite a while back. All right, can I shift, Joe?
You can.
All right. Joe is wearing 2 hats again today. He's pretty good at it, wouldn't you agree?
Yes.
For being hatless.
It's a very simple chant, and we'll do it a few times. So join in wherever you would like, okay?
Like the
to that presence, that power that abides within us, that we abide within always, in all times and all circumstances. As we breathe in and out, we are feeling our deep connection with that source within us. And we are feeling steadied by it and strengthened and centered. And we are remembering this truth about living beings everywhere, that there is not one of us that is separate from this indwelling power, this renewing life, this steadying peace. It is with us all, in all places, in all circumstances, ready to lift us up and to guide us forward in peace and wholeness and harmony with one another. We affirm this deep truth for everyone in our circle of prayer this morning, everyone in our community, for living beings across the globe. We affirm this high truth, the ultimate truth, our oneness with God, that makes all things possible. So as we know that truth for ourselves, for living beings everywhere, we feel a great sense of gratitude and of release. God is powerfully at work in the world and within each one of us. This is the unfailing truth, and we are grateful. And so it is. Amen. All right. Well, we have a song it's by Michael Gott this morning. He's a wonderful musician. He's also, I think he's senior minister now at Unity of Houston. Just a wonderful songwriter and human being. And it's a song about, God guiding us and providing us with all that we need. All that I need, it's called.
The light of
see people singing along again. We went a long time not seeing each other's mouths.
That's right.
All right. Well, I'm going to give you an old joke today. It's one of my favorite old church jokes. I was going to do it last week, and then I bumped it for an Irish joke last week. This is the one, it's my all-time favorite, so you probably will have heard it. But it's about a beginning preacher, and he's kind of a novice, and he gets called to do a graveside service. It's kind of out in an area of town. He's never been there before. He kind of doesn't know where he's going, but he's got a strong, willing spirit. So he heads out, and he gets kind of lost, and he winds up really late when he gets to the cemetery and heads up to the grave site. And he's so late that it's like the funeral director's already gone, the hearse is already gone, and he looks in the grave, and it looks like the lid is already on the vault, but he doesn't want to fail in his duties, so he begins his prayers, and he really pours it on in earnest because he felt bad for being so late. So lots of prayers, lots of scripture, and he finally wraps it up with an amen and starts heading back to his car. And one of the workmen that was just hanging around there watching said, I've been putting in septic tanks for 25 years. I've never seen anything like it. It's one of my favorites. All right. Earnest preacher. Talking about, my title's Everyday Alchemy. And I realized as I was kind of coming up with some ideas, it's sort of a little bit of a continuation of the idea we were talking about last week about stories and the stories we tell, and we live by stories. And so I got to thinking about how we create new stories in life. We move out of old stories that don't suit us anymore, and we begin to tell new stories. And there's a kind of an amazing process involved in that I started thinking about as alchemy. Remember the word for alchemy? It was like an old kind of proto-science or philosophy going way back in the medieval era. People practiced it for centuries. In terms of physical terms, it was about turning base metals like lead or tin or things like that into gold, into more precious things. But as a philosophy, it was much broader than that. So it's an interesting thing to think about in terms of turning what's base or useless in our lives into something useful, helpful, maybe even precious. Alchemy. So, and it seems to me we are doing this all the time. There's a kind of everyday alchemy going on for all of us all the time, always has been, probably always will be as long as we are here. This is just as relevant now as it was way back in the Middle Ages. It's also everyday alchemy. It's a perennial spiritual teaching, I believe, a spiritual philosophy that I think kind of is woven into all faith traditions if you kind of are looking for it. There's lots and lots of scriptures in the Bible about our capacity to transform and transmute things. I like that word, transmute. There's lots of scriptures about the capacity of our minds. You can renew your mind, transform yourself by the renewing of your mind, Paul said. That's from Romans 12. There's a wonderful one from Colossians about put on a new self. It's like we have volition. We can change the stories, change ourselves. Isaiah 43 has a nice one about remember not the things of old. Behold, I am doing a new thing. See how it springs forth. This transmutation that we are involved in throughout our lives. And then I especially like this one from the Gnostic Gospel, Thomas. Where Jesus, there's the sayings of Jesus, and Jesus said, if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. It's a mystical statement, a very interesting one. Is what does he mean by what you bring forth what is within you? What is within us? There's all kinds of stuff within us. There's hopes, and there's joy, and there's creative ideas. There's also sorrows and loss and grief. All these things are in us too. What does he mean when you bring forth what is within you? I think that maybe he's talking a little bit about this everyday alchemy. As we kind of bring forth and transmute it, we can be saved by that. Don't stuff it, bring it forth, and transform yourself as you go forward. There's a power in us to do that. Maybe it's the ultimate power. Viktor Frankl talked about that's the ultimate human freedom is always to choose your attitude in any set of circumstances, to choose your own way, whatever the circumstances are. How am I going to approach that? What's my attitude toward it? What's the story I'm going to tell about that and about myself? So basically, we're talking about a human, kind of transformation, no matter what's going on. And there's an energy in us that wants to enable us to thrive, not just survive, but thrive, no matter what our circumstances, and is seeking to guide us in that kind of transformation process, to take what's been hard and move it into a direction that's going to nurture us and empower us. And it's with us always, regardless of the circumstances, this energy that wants to enable us to take what we've been through and turn it into something life-affirming, to guide us in how to transmute it. And it's something we do all the time, I think kind of intuitively, without thinking about what we're doing. Whenever we've gone through something difficult, like, I don't know, maybe a pandemic, and the hard times of that and the isolation of that, there's something in us that's kind of guiding us to, okay, what have I gained from that? How can I transmute that now into something new in my life, or improvement in my life that I want now, having been through that? This energy is going on in us all the time. I think we're practicing alchemy all the time, every day, in one way or another, given the circumstances we're dealing with in our lives. I was thinking about this as I take a daily digital New York Times feed as my morning kind of news intake. And one glimpse of the news and you'll find all these stories of transmutation, all these stories of alchemy. I invite you to think about that the next time you watch whatever your favorite news program or your digital feed is. There will be stories about people who have somehow taken really hard stuff, base metals, tin, lead, and somehow transformed it into something that's a blessing. That's a blessing for themselves, and that's a blessing for their community. It's going on all the time. So I was sort of just thinking of some examples about that this week. And just have a few to share with you. This is one I picked up in the Times. Francis Carré, is a young man from a small country in Western Africa. I don't know much about Burkina Faso. I might be saying that wrong. Okay, he grew up there. It's a very poor country, and he grew up very poor. And the schoolrooms there were sweltering hot. And he has a memory from childhood. He was sweltering hot in his schoolrooms for so many years. What he began to do is in that schoolroom, he would begin to fantasize about how to build a cooler school. A school with more air, a school that would be more comfortable for children to learn in. And he kept having that dream for a long, long time. When he got out of school, he won a scholarship to a carpentry school, a vocational school for carpentry in Germany. And then after that, he did so well, he managed to go to an architecture school in Berlin. And he wound up building structures out of wood. They were kind of remarkable. If you have a chance, his name is spelled K-E-R-E, if you want to look him up, Francis Carré. And he went back to his hometown, Gando, and he built this school. It's called the Gando School, which, and it's very, very inviting now. It's this overhanging ceiling. Everything is out of wood. It's very open. It's very airy. And it was such a beautiful gift to the community. The attendance at school went from like 100 to 700 in no time at all. And his talents just began to spread far and wide. He's got a number of structures in this country. There's some internationally. He's won a prized architecture award now called the Pritzker Prize, if any of you follow architecture. So uncomfortable schoolboy in a sweltering classroom to prize-winning architect, taking the uncomfortable, the unpleasant, the stuck, and turning it into something else. Amazing energy at work in him. Alchemy, kind of amazing. I was thinking in my own life, I've known a lot of talented alchemists. One of them, the most important ones in my life, and I've probably talked to you about her before, a wonderful woman, a psychologist, with a specialty in grief and bereavement, Dr. Joanna Hart. I don't know whether any of you would remember her. She's been gone several years now, but she had a special gift for bringing people, supporting people as they went through grief and bereavement. And I met her doing some hospice volunteer training for a hospice program back in the 90s. She would, as a part of her presentation and her training segment for volunteers, she would show a little slideshow the people in her life that she had to deal with a lot of loss, the people who had gone on before her. Her mother died of breast cancer. This was in Canada somewhere, very little support, no hospice then, very little support, very difficult passing, her mother. She had a brother who committed suicide, all kinds of sorrows in her past, and she made that a part of her presentation. So given that background, boy, that's heavy stuff. That's difficult stuff for a teenager, a young woman to come through. How do you transmute that? None of us would be able to figure that out, but there's an energy in us that will guide us in it. She was guided to major in psychology in college. She became a practicing psychologist, and then it was just the beginning days of hospice. It was beginning to grow in our communities. This was in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, I think is when hospice started moving through our country. So she immediately gravitated to a job as the psychologist for what was home health hospice at the time. It was out of Riverside Hospital. That's how I met her. And I went to her for counseling for 6 months or so, once a week after my mother's difficult passing. The blessings that unfolded from her ability as an alchemist to transmute the sorrows of her life, the losses, the griefs, and turn that somehow into a blessing, a mutual blessing, a blessing for everyone she contacted in her work, all those she influenced, and a blessing for herself, because it enabled her to move through that process and feel like she had transmuted it. She experienced that blessing herself. That's amazing alchemy. That's amazing alchemy. And then one other story I was just sort of delighted to hear about. Do you all remember James Brown, the Godfather of soul? Well, he was a heck of a guy, and he did a fair amount of philanthropy I wasn't aware of. There was a story about him about 50 years ago, this week, March 16, 1972. He took his whole 18-piece review, his whole big, huge band, to Rikers Island Jail in New York City. Rikers Island, they're still having lots of problems at Rikers Island, I believe. But he was invited to perform there, and he said yes, and took his whole review there. It happened because a woman was just guided. She worked for the Board of Corrections in New York State, and she was trying to do good things for the inmates to, kind of provide some encouragement and support. And she thought it would be a great idea to have James Brown come. Well, he didn't do a lot of that kind of thing, but she went to his agent in his Midtown Manhattan office to ask, and they said, well, James Brown he rarely comes into the office, and we don't know when. And she said, well, that's all right. I'll just sit over in the corner and knit. And she did this, and she did it for weeks. She said, I'll just sit over I won't bother anybody. I'll just sit over in the corner and I'll knit. And if he comes in, I'll be here to chat with him about it. Well, she stayed and stayed. Everybody got to know her, in the office, and she kind of became a fixture around there. And he did come in, and she did have a face-to-face with him, and how could he say no, He agreed to do the concert. And he went, and it was like Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show the previous evening, and then Rikers Island the next day. Kind of amazing. But part of the reason he did it was because he had been there. At 16, he had gone to jail for breaking into a car. I didn't know that about James Brown. He spent some time in jail. He had some trouble. He had been confused. He was real concerned about drugs proliferating on the streets. He did a bunch of songs about that. Don't Be a Dropout, or King Heroin. He had a bunch of songs, kind of warnings about drug use. So he took his whole band there, and since the room was too small, he did 2 concerts back to back, each one with 500, 600 young men there. Most of them awaiting trial. They were all between like 16 and 20, something like that. And he talked to them. He did music, and he also said, when you leave here, you can have a good life or you can have a bad life. However you do it when you get out is up to you. It's good work. That's good alchemy. He took what he'd been through and he transmuted it into something that was going to be a blessing to others, and he was blessed in the process as well. There's a mystery about how this happens, this transmutation. We're guided in it, and the opportunities come along to help us transmute it. Whatever you've been through, some invitation, some idea, some suggestion will come your way to press that into service in a useful way, to use it in a way that's going to be a blessing. And you're probably already doing it in your life. hard things you have been through, you have found a way to take that and give back somehow out of that. Be a blessing to somebody else so that maybe they don't have to have the same hardships. Just like James Brown did at Rikers Island, or Joanna Hart did in her grief sessions, bereavement support sessions, or Francis Carré did, building his beautiful wooden structures that children could learn in comfortably. We are all alchemists in this sense. We can choose to use whatever we've been through. If we don't shut down, if we're alert and open, and not just shut down in anger to hard times, if we stay open, we'll be guided in ways to transmute it, in ways that'll bless us and bless others. As we bring forth what is within us, we'll be healed by it, as will others. So I have a poem to share with you. I wrote a poem this week. Can't remember the last time I wrote a poem. It's been a long, long time. But it's kind of on this theme. So maybe if you catch on to the chorus, you can join me on this little 2-line refrain. It's what you do with what you've been through that turns the tide and makes you you. Your broken heart, your squandered dreams, your bones so tired you want to scream. It's never too late to claim the gift of what grows in the heart when you're in the rift. It's what you do with what you've been through that turns the tide and makes you you. The fall on the ice, the lump in the breast, the fearful nights when you can't find rest, the grit in the gut that makes you hurl will grind you into a shiny pearl. It's what you do with what you've been through that turns the tide and makes you you. It's what you do with what you've been through that turns the tide and makes you you. Amen.
Amen.
Let's take that into a closing prayer. As we close our eyes, we affirm the high truth of God's living, unfailing presence with us. Day by day, night by night, we are never apart, and God is always guiding us in the path of life, of peace, of freedom, helping us to take whatever has been hard, whatever losses or griefs in our lives, whatever sorrows, whatever seeming failures, and turn them to gold. God is guiding us in that moment by moment. And how grateful we are that we are never alone. God is with us always. And so it is. Amen.
Amen.
All right, we have one more song, I believe. And then we will have some announcements in-house by our trusty platform host. And Joe will come on up again. All right. And I'll tell you a little bit about this song as I come up. How many of you were here when Reverend Robin had devotion visit the church? Yeah, wonderful vocal duo. This is a song they did. So it was written by Robert Anderson of that duo. It goes back a ways now, this song, but it's lovely. If you know the chorus and want to sing along, actually there's a line everybody can sing along. It goes, ha, ha, ha. Can I hear that? Ha, ha, ha. You got it. Okay. No, it's not that. That's good. You'll hear your part when it comes up. Start it out. Join in whenever you can. Ha, 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 ha. down here, and we have some more announcements that Linda Westner will fill us in on. I'll invite her to come on out. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you, Joanne, for that delightful message. It certainly gave me a lot to think about for the
Thank you.
coming week, and we'll work our alchemy.